sir.
Very well. We made contact. We had some technical glitches there, but I'm pleased to be able to talk to you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Can you see me as well?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'd like to go ahead and focus the. I have some questions I want to ask you, but I want to focus the camera back to the defendant and counsel.
Okay.
Please.
Okay.
I'm not sure you can see everyone. Give me a moment. I'll move the camera, move the focus of the camera.
I have a general sense.
Very well.
Okay.
Now, first of all, we're on the record here, and we're in a competency hearing. Now, I wanted, there may be some subsequent appellate review of this matter, Dr. Williamson, so I'd like to go ahead and swear you in. At this point, you swear or affirm that any testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Counsel, I'd like to start the ball rolling, and then I'll give you an opportunity to ask questions. Dr. Williamson, could you first tell us a little bit about yourself, and putting this on the record, what your credentials and qualifications would be?
Yes, sir. So I am a clinical psychologist, Jeffrey Michael Williamson, and been in private practice since 1991 and in Florida since 1990. Well, I'm sorry. I've been in practice since 1991 and in Florida since 1992, going into private practice in 1996. I have a PhD from the University of Missouri, Columbia, Missouri, with specialization in child clinical psychology. I have testified in court over 2,500 times, and I'm currently in private practice in Melbourne, Florida.
Thank you, Doctor. Does either side object to the court eliciting opinions from Dr. Williamson in the field of psychology?
No, no. No, no.
Dr. Williamson, I had entered an order calling for an evaluation of Ronald Russell Farnham for competence to proceed, and you received a copy of that order. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, Your Honor.
Now, you have reviewed the various documents purportedly authored by Mr. Farnham. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
And his pursuant to an appointment, I understand made by his counsel, he appeared at your office for the interview that was contemplated by that order. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Now, we have, both counsel and
I object.
have reviewed.
I didn't appear, Your Honor. I specially visited on that matter of the Ronald Russell Farnham truck. I object. I object. I object.
I reviewed a document entitled the Competency Evaluation of yours regarding this, and you authored such a document. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, my impression of that document is that it involved impressions of Mr. Farnham, but it did not have the evaluation associated with each of the criteria for competence, as would be typical and as would be called for by the order. Is that a fair description of it?
That is correct, yes, Your Honor.
Why was that?
That Mr. Farnham refused to answer any of the competency questions.
I object.
Typically
I object.
background information, invoking
Was that you
his,
talking?
right to remain silent.
We reached some impressions, however, notwithstanding that indication. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Could you share those impressions with us?
Yes, Your Honor. It appears to me that Mr. Farnham is suffering from delusional disorder, primarily grandiose and persecutory type, and that typically is a diagnosis that is part of individuals that have psychotic processes. However, you can have delusional disorder without hallucinations or thought disorder, things of that nature. I would add that having reviewed, and at that point there was only an initial document filed, actually a written note, I believe, from his mother, but having read over the other documents, I would add some concerns about, possible thought disorder, and I say that simply because the legal texts that or responses that were made by Mr. Farnham are difficult to understand. It seems very similar to what we would call a word salad type of presentation when we're talking to someone who is suffering from a psychotic disorder, and they're basically not making sense. There's what we call loosening of associations and referential thinking, where they will go back to what they've said before, but really there's a lack of coherence, if you will, in their oral presentation. So in looking at the written documents, and certainly I'm not a legal expert, but looking up some of the words and things that were used by Mr. Farnham and the general presentation of the documents, it would look nonsensical, if you will. It's not clear to me what point he is making or what his defense is, even though he is making the point that he's able to represent himself. So all I'm saying is that in addition to the delusion that I definitely saw, I do have some concerns now about a thought disorder.
Dr. Williamson, I wanted to ask you about the nature of his apparent delusions.
Yes, sir.
It's on the screen.
Oftentimes, we see people who have some unorthodox beliefs here in court, and they sometimes are part of what might be characterized as a sovereign citizen movement.
I object. There's no such thing as a sovereign citizen. I object. I object. I object.
Where they're oftentimes seeking to frustrate law enforcement and obstruct processes in court.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Is that a fair characterization from your impressions of Ms. Farnham?
Certainly I can see that as an interpretation, and I am aware of this sovereign citizen concept or idea. Having evaluated individuals who have taken that approach, I would say there is a distinction with Mr. Farnham, and that distinction would be, while I do agree that there's an attempt to, in essence, say that the laws and judicial process, do not apply to him, the reasoning is substantially more illogical, it seems to me, than your typical individual who is making that sovereign citizen, if you will, defense. So what I'm saying here is that there seems to be a lot more disorganization and lack of clarity. And even though when you evaluate individuals with the sovereign citizen concept, they often have presuppositions, et cetera, that are, let's say, equally unusual or distorted. But we could say persecutory delusions might be there as well. I would distinguish Mr. Farnham's situation because of the lack of coherence, if you will, at least from what I've read, as to what really his argument is.
Dr. Williamson, there's an assessment tool for the evaluation of delusions and delusion-like beliefs. It's called the Brown Assessment Belief Scale. Are you familiar with it?
I am familiar with it, sir, yes.
Is that something that would be useful in evaluating the delusion or delusion-like beliefs of Mr. Farnham?
Well, it certainly would provide an empirical basis beyond just my observations, and certainly can be done. Again, my concern would be level of cooperation, and if using that, my own observations, I'm aware of this instrument. I've not used it personally, so I don't know if it's a primarily observational measure or if it's a self-report measure. So I would have to look into that. If it's a self-report measure, then I don't think we're going to get any better information than we already have. If it's an observational measure, then it would give us a better, I think, empirical basis for my conclusion.
I was reading an article last night. It's entitled Integrating Non-Psychiatric Models of Delusion-Like Beliefs into Forensic Psychiatric Assessment. The author is Joseph M. Pierre from the Journal of the American Academy of Psychiatry and the Law Online, June 2019.
Okay.
It states in part as follows. Assessing the pathological nature of beliefs is fraught with challenges. However, including the limited options in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM,
Yes, sir.
For the characterization of delusion-like beliefs, DLBs, the expanded cultural sanctioning of fringe beliefs in the age of the internet, and the potentially conflicting agendas of clinical and forensic psychiatric evaluation. So my question is, if the assessment is so difficult, how can the court make this determination, or can the court make this determination with respect to competence where the defendant is not cooperating, where there has been no empirical assessment of his beliefs or delusion-like beliefs, or his delusions?
Well, I think we have, and if I understand you correctly, Your Honor, typically it is fairly apparent when individuals are delusional that, by the statements, et cetera, that they make or other correspondence, and clearly what I'm going off of in a major part is the, correspondence, you are able to identify some of the major parts of it. In application to, forensics, I think one of the questions that's being asked is this either malingered presentation or a just outright, attempt to obstruct the legal process, and that's where it becomes a little more difficult sometimes, is distinguishing between whether it is a legitimate presentation or malingered in some fashion. Regardless, part of the problem that I had with this evaluation was in exercising his right to remain silent and not responding to my questions. All I can say is that the effort wasn't put forth, the ability to observe the defendant was minimal, so in and of itself, my primary response to that was looking at the documentation, et cetera, that it did appear to me that there is actual delusional content. But if further assessment among more empirical lines, like using an instrument like that, is beneficial, I'm certainly more than willing to assist the court with that.
Yeah, that brings me to my next question. And let me preface this with a quote from Through the Looking Glass, the classic children's story by Lewis Carroll.
Yes, sir.
Which the quote begins with the words of Humpty Dumpty. When I use a word